With this chapter of One Punch Man, we have the proper reveal of a secret we've been waiting years for. One that has some pretty major implications. The cover page of One Punch Man Chapter 211, titled Handsomely Masked Sweet Mask, features Saitama, Metal Bat, and the B-class hero Mad Devil Yankee checking out a very attractive motorcycle. We return to Sweet Mask, the top A-class hero, giving Saitama a lecture in hopes of making him the greatest hero alive. He was stressing the importance of appearance, specifically how a hero's looks can positively impact their approval ratings, which is probably the main reason why the Psychic Sisters Fubuki and Tatsumaki are so loved by the public despite being destructive psychopaths who trash their cities more than most monsters. Sweet Mask scolded Saitama for not paying attention. He questioned if the man didn't want to become a popular hero, which as a reminder is something that Saitama never asked for. He described Saitama's style as being rough around the edges, which the bald man wasn't too happy about. But lucky for him, Sweet Mask promised to bring over his personal staff. They would be giving Kate Baldy a total makeover. So the idol hero told him to prepare himself for an eventful day tomorrow. Hearing that, Saitama began to panic. He shouted that nobody told him he'd be involved in all this tomorrow too, which wasn't true at all. Sweet Mask had already told him this multiple times. He just wasn't listening. Besides, Sweet Mask already knows that the guy has tons of free time. And to sell it even more, he let Saitama know that not showing up would be a breach of contract. And the last thing Saitama wants is to pay legal fees. For the sake of maintaining his health and beauty, Saitama wouldn't be allowed to stay up late since he needs his rest. Not to mention the importance of proper skincare. Sweet Mask is just teaching this guy to be a proper adult at this point. We then received a shot of a little rover running to indicate the passage of time. The next morning, Sweet Mask's staff was assembled, just like he promised, and they would get started right after Saitama finished his breakfast. But before then, Sweet Mask told him to go wash his face. Yeah, he is totally parenting him. There was a fashion coordinator who would help Saitama wear cool outfits that everyone would want to copy. A voice trainer who would help Saitama be better at public speaking. A speech consultant who would help Saitama develop an energetic, clear, and somewhat sensual voice for the sake of his upcoming musical endeavors. A hairstylist who would help Saitama gain an appealing hairstyle. God bless his soul. Someone who would teach him to always smile in front of children, look sharp and determined in the midst of battle, and always look at cameras. And finally, a character designer. They would be changing Saitama's hero name, costume, and final moves. Just by looking, Sweet Mask could tell that Saitama got his suit from an online party costume shop, which the bald hero couldn't deny. So there's the casual drop of his costume's origins. When it comes to handsomeness, Sweet Mask urged Saitama to aim to be someone like him, to reach a level where he could be seen in the same light. And that last bit managed to provoke a response from Saitama, who didn't think the guy was especially handsome. Besides, he doesn't really know him. And I think it's hilarious how true this is. By virtue of Murata's incredible art, aside from the guy's emphasis on hair and clothes, Sweet Mask's features aren't exactly that different from plenty of other characters in the story. He also changes his appearance pretty frequently. And when it comes to the webcomic, especially at that time, everyone tended to be drawn so crudely that him being labeled as handsome is pretty silly. Either way, Sweet Mask focused more on the fact that Saitama didn't know who he was despite him being in movies and plenty of shows. Unfortunately for him, Saitama's old place only showed free channels that reported on disasters. This is why he went so long without knowing about the Hero Association until Genos told him about it. Now Sweet Mask was even more shocked. He was amazed by the fact that Saitama could manage to be a hero without knowing what's going on in the world. He wondered if it wasn't difficult. Saitama was unfazed, since being a hero is just a hobby for him. His words moved Sweet Mask even more. He realized that this might be the spirit of a true hero. Saitama noticed his apprehension, but didn't know what to make of it. Suddenly, Sweet Mask decided to alter their plans for the day. He wanted to spend more time talking to Saitama one-on-one, so he told the others to wait on standby. which I'm sure that hairstylist is grateful for because he's going to need some time to figure this out. As they trekked elsewhere, again, Sweet Mask brought up his desire to abolish the S-Class heroes. Something that he could feasibly do thanks to the position he's managed to cultivate with the Hero Association's upper management. He isn't fond of how self-centered the top heroes are, which might sound pretty hypocritical considering the curriculum he laid out for Saitama. But despite all that, he firmly believes that what they truly need are heroes who can live up to the public's needs and expectations. And this sentiment of his extends to the top S-Class hero Blast as well. After all, they don't even know his true character. What the people really need is hope that they can actually see. Only then would they be able to brave the difficult times ahead of them. In the webcomic, this mention was a bit stronger since Blast never actually appeared. Even now, despite the many times we've seen Blast in the manga, especially with all the redraws, in the webcomic, he's still a total enigma who's never been outside of Tatsumaki's flashback. This is doubly fascinating to me since, unlike the webcomic, the manga version teased some sort of connection between Sweet Mask and Blast. We saw this during the Monster Association raid, and the brief scene seemed to greatly resemble the top hero's encounter with Tatsumaki. As far as we know, that part wasn't redrawn or changed. So is that still a thing, or are we supposed to pretend it never happened? Because it certainly didn't happen in the webcomic. Sweet Mask envisions a grand beacon of justice. Someone who, like the sun, could bring light to their world. Something I imagine Saitama's bald head would be perfect for. For Sweet Mask, the ideal hero needed to be seen and admired. Hearing that, Saitama questioned why the idol doesn't just become the ideal hero he's looking for. After all, he's already pretty popular himself. But that was something that Sweet Mask believed he absolutely could not become. Saitama didn't manage to catch that, but instead of repeating himself, Sweet Mask changed the subject to how wonderful nature felt. He believed that doing this sort of thing was necessary to avoid being broken by stress. On top of that, he was concerned about Saitama's dead fish eyes and lack of facial muscles. So he asked his protege if he couldn't just shine some more. Saitama was fed up with all the casual insults, and that's when Sweet Mask had a great idea. He knew just the place to cheer Kate Baldy up. And that's how they found themselves at an amusement park and inside of a Ferris wheel. Sweet Mask gleefully wondered if his fellow hero was having fun. He told him to try and express his inner self, and Saitama's expression made it pretty clear how he was feeling. From there, Sweet Mask asked Kate Baldy why he decided to become a hero. Again, the response was that it's just a hobby. Saitama also shared his actual name. Sweet Mask apologized for his rudeness and began to call him Saitama. In turn, he shared his real name too, Butte. Saitama decided to turn the question around and asked Butte why he became a hero. Sweet Mask hesitated. To explain that, he needed to tell Saitama his story first. But Saitama really didn't want to hear all that yapping and tried to stop him. But the ride they were on would take 30 minutes to go around, so they had plenty of time. Saitama was trapped and distraught. Sweet Mask explained that when it comes to his ugly appearance, he always had an inferiority complex. To make up for it, he decided to be beautiful on the inside by living in accordance with strict moral principles. Hearing the guy talk about looks yet again immediately lowered Saitama's interest, but Sweet Mask urged him to keep listening. 3 years ago, just after the establishment of the Hero Association, Butte decided to try his hand at the exam. Back then, the review process was incredibly lax. Pretty much everyone got in, but the turnover was high too. Barely 1 out of 10 C-class heroes remained after 2 months. Early on, Butte was too self-conscious to ever show his face, so he always wore a mask when he did hero work. He gained plenty of fans, and although many of them wanted to see his face, he never revealed it. His real face and name were a mystery. He actually stole the information he submitted in the past and destroyed it. After being promoted to B-class, he picked a name that sounded both powerful and mysterious. He became Secret Mask. So it seems like back then, heroes could actually choose their own names. But as he gained more and more attention, his fear of his face being revealed grew exponentially. Yet, despite his mounting anxiety and fear, his body became exponentially strong. At the time, he didn't understand why this was happening, and it looks like the design of Secret Mask may be based on a mix between Kamen Rider Ryuki and the magnificent Zubat. Although, the question marks on his attire might also point towards Kamen Rider Quiz, which would be a super niche design choice. But then again, the design of Blast seems to have been inspired by a pair of Reeboks. There's also the fact that Murata's old editor for iShield 21, Yu Saito, was notably a huge fan of Kamen Rider. And these days, he is the 12th editor-in-chief for Weekly Shonen Jump. Anyways, one day, Secret Mask's face was accidentally revealed in the midst of battle. He began to freak out and feared what people would think. But instead of being condemned, all he heard were the sounds of fangirls cheering. When he saw his own reflection in a puddle, he didn't even recognize himself, which is to say that he must have avoided mirrors like the plague before then. At that moment, Butte realized what had been happening to his body. His body had been strengthened several times over by unnatural means, along with an appearance that had conveniently been transformed. The truth is that by cursing his ugliness so vehemently, he had become a monster. Now, this goes back to his concern from the previous chapter about the serious issue of monsters originating from humans, and his presumed avoidance of mirrors and fear of his own ugliness explains why facing Fuhrer Ugly was so traumatic for him, not to mention the fact that they fought inside of a hall of mirrors. In the webcomic, this specific type of monster was referred to as an Ugmon. Ugly humans who become monsters as a result of their jealousy or inferiority turning to hatred, and then turning their hearts evil. But by virtue of his beautiful intentions and righteous convictions, Sweet Mask has managed to become some sort of inverse creature. In the webcomic, the S-Class heroes had to admit that Sweet Mask was S-Class caliber himself. The only reason he stays at the top of A-Class is so that he can act as a barrier against the undeserving. This is incredible since, by virtue of hiding the fact that he's a monster, Sweet Mask has always held back his true power. The fact that he's revealed this to Saitama is also a major testament to the faith he has in the bald hero. But I am of the impression that this confession is even more profound than just that. Sweet Mask is an Ugmon, but there are a multitude of different monsters in this world. We discussed the secret power system of this world at length in a video before. Ultimately, this world doesn't have a bunch of unique superpowers like most superhero stories. The reality is that pretty much any human with abnormal abilities or strength in this story is likely to be some manner of monster. The monstrous status of Sweet Mask spawned from an inferiority complex that was harnessed productively. And the very same may be said in the case of Super Alloy Darkshine. He was a total wimp with no self-confidence. Then he dedicated his entire existence to working out and gained a degree of strength that was literally incalculable. He lost to Garo because he was unwilling to struggle and only sought gratifying victories. His fear was that he might not escape their fight unscathed. But aside from a bloody nose, the only damage Darkshine actually suffered was mental. His bodybuilding dark luster is not something he applies to his body anymore. It is literally a part of him like Monster Garo's carapace was. Metal Bat is a beast who grows stronger in proportion to the damage he endures. Tank Top Master's source of strength is his tank top. He makes them himself, and they act as some sort of parasitic entities that make him strong enough to hurl entire buildings. Pig God is a devourer like Gums who eats monsters whole and can store others inside of his stomach. He can also shed that fat quickly and is saving a secret power for the prophesized disaster. Atomic Samurai has formed a symbiotic bond with the Sunblade. Child Emperor and Metal Knight have super genius intelligence. Zombie Man is literally a monster who was created by the House of Evolution. Watchdog Man is a mysterious dog costume wearing guardian of Q City. And thanks to Phoenix Man, we know that wearing animal suits can monsterize. The fighting styles that Bang created were at the core of Garo's strength, and he was a ruthless maniac in his youth. Drive Knight and Genos are cyborgs with barely any human parts remaining. Flashy Flash was raised from a young age to be a vessel for the ultimate monster, God. King's Luck is nothing if not monstrous. Puri Puri Prisoner is the kind of monster that we can't talk about on YouTube. Tatsumaki is a floating calamity who was experimented on by Tsukuyomi, a god cube possessing organization of artificial espers. And Blast's powers are all derivatives of God's providence. The truth is that all of the S-Class heroes are monsters. Productive and helpful ones, yes, but monsters nevertheless. Garo, a former monster, is also slated to join their ranks in due time. And with all this, we'd be remiss not to consider Saitama a monster as well. But as monsters, the S-Class heroes are all a mess, and teeter on the edge of becoming disasters themselves. Saitama's role in the story, unbeknownst to him and everyone else, is to influence and reorient them towards true heroics. And I tell you man, one is really one hell of a writer. The manga continues to be faithful to the webcomic, so I'm confident that the next chapter is going to be insane. So I hope you'll be with us when the time comes. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.